Hello there and welcome. So now that we have created our AWS account, we can start setting up our first instance. So this will be a machine that will have an operating system and we can basically do whatever we want with it. So we go over here to instances and we can create our first instance. So we click on launch instances. This may look a bit daunting, but it's very straightforward. We basically need to specify which kind of operating system we want, which kind of specs. So all of these things are going to be set up over here. We're going to give a name to this instance, and we're going to name it something like My Unity Server, because we can have a bunch of different instances and we don't want to get confused between them. Then we're going to scroll down and we can select an operating system. We're going to stick with this Amazon Linux because we don't really need anything else. You can also create an Ubuntu one, but I advise you to use these ones and not Windows, for example, because we really don't need this extra GUI. We're not going to play games. We're not going to do anything like that. We need it very minimalistic, so we're going to use the Amazon Linux or Ubuntu. It doesn't really matter. They're very similar, okay? So we're not going to change anything. We're going to select this default one. Then we can also select an AMI. So this is basically an image of our machine. We're going to use this free one. So again, you can change the architecture. We can use different ones, but we are not interested in this, so we're simply going to keep the first one that was selected. Then we can change the architecture. Again, we don't need to change this. And over here, we can specify the instance type. So for example, if you want to create some kind of server, some kind of machine that will be used for AI, then you probably need a strong machine. Think about it as having a stronger computer, okay? So if you click over here, you can select a machine with more GPU, with more CPUs, right? We can have a very strong machine. You can see these ones, but of course they will cost you more. We don't want to pay anything because we don't really need these strong machines. So we're going to stick with this free one, with this T3 Micro. So this is a very simple one and we don't need more than that to have a server, okay? If in the future you want to have more capabilities and you will have a bigger game that will require more resources, you can always create a stronger instance and obviously pay for it. But this one is for free, so we're going to use it. Now, if we scroll down, we can set up some network settings, but we're going to do this later when we actually need to. And over here, we need to create a key pair. So this is basically a key that will be downloaded into our computer. And with this key, we are going to be able to connect to our machine. Now, you don't have to use this key to connect to the machine because you can also connect to the machine via the AWS website, but they still require us to create this even if you're not going to use it. So we're going to click over here, create new key pair, and we're not going to change anything. It's going to be an RSA encryption. We're going to make it a PEM file, but we're just going to give it a name, give it something good. So if you forget about it, you will still know what it is. So for example, Unity Server Key. So we're going to keep this name, we're going to keep all the different settings, and we're going to create the key pair. So just pay attention where you download this and keep it somewhere safe. Now, as I told you, we're not going to deal with the settings. For example, we can allow different kinds of traffic. We can restrict the connection to our machine to specific IPs, because maybe you only want to connect to this machine from your home PC. So you're going to be able to limit the connection to only one specific address or maybe to a bunch of IP addresses. We currently want to be able to connect from any kind of IP, so we're not going to change anything. And over here, we can also change the amount of storage. So in the free tier, you can use up to 30 gigabytes, but we don't really need this. 8 is enough, especially for this tutorial. If you really need more, then you can simply change this and you can add more local storage, but we don't need this. We're going to use 8. And that's it basically. You have a few more advanced details, but we don't need them. And now all we need to do is click on Launch Instance, and it's going to create this instance. So now we can see that this instance was created. We can go back to the EC dashboard, and at this point we are not going to see anything over here because it will take a few more seconds. But if we click on Instances, we can try to refresh. And now we can see that this instance was created. It's also in the running state, so the instance can have different states. If we click over here, we can see it can be in a stop state, in a start state, in a reboot state, and terminated. And this is exactly like a regular computer. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, and we can do the same thing with our machine. Now, if you actually have a server that is running and is connected to some kind of game, and you have users that are playing the game, you should always obviously keep it running. Otherwise, your game is not going to be able to connect to the server. So it should always be in a running state. But if you still don't have any game connected to it, if it's just in development, then you should stop the instance when you are done working on it. Now, if we click on the actual instance, we can see a lot of information. We got the public IP, we have a private IP. Now we want to connect to this machine. So there are two main ways to connect to these cloud machines. The first way is the traditional way using SSH. This way we can connect to any computer, whether it's a cloud computer like this one or just a physical computer. You can use SSH from your command line, you can provide the IP and also the username, and then you can log in to your machine. But the good thing about AWS is that you can actually log in into this machine from the browser. So you can simply click on connect and it will automatically SSH into this machine. So you can also go back and just select the instance. So if you select your instance, you can also click on connect because you can have a bunch of different instances, and if it's not selected, you won't be able to connect. So you need to select the relevant instance and then you click on connect, or you can just go into the instance and click on connect. Now you're going to be presented with this page, and it just tells you that we're going to use port 22 for SSH, and this is the usual port that is being used for SSH. And of course, we don't need to do much because all of this happens behind the scenes. This will be the username, this will be the IP. So now we can simply click on connect and it will connect to the machine. And now you can see that an extra tab was created and we are logged in to our Linux operating system. Now this may look weird to you, especially if you don't know about Linux, if you always used Mac OS or Windows, but this is how an operating system looks like without all the graphical interface. And we can also have a graphical interface for Linux, but we don't really need to because we are going to create a server out of it, and there is really no need to have all this extra information. So this is the command line, and from the command line we do whatever we want. We can type in different commands. Let's also make it a bit larger so we can increase the size. I'm simply pressing Control and I'm using the wheel on my mouse to zoom in a bit so you will see it better. We can also close this, and this is basically the name of our user and the IP of this machine, and this is basically what you see to know that you are logged in with this user, because you can also be logged in with a different user on the same machine. So you can have separate users for the same machine, but we're going to have one user, which is our user. Now this is not going to be a tutorial about Linux, so if you have absolutely no knowledge about Linux, I added a link in the description for a random tutorial about Linux, and you should just watch it to have some kind of basic understanding what Linux is, but you can just follow my steps and do whatever I do, and eventually you will get the same result. Now all you need to know is that this is an operating system, and I can prove you by showing that we are actually inside a folder or a directory. So if I use this command pwd, which means print working directory, and I press enter, it will show us that we are inside of this directory, which is inside of the home directory. Okay, and it means that there is a file system on this machine. Now, if I want to go a bit back, I can simply do cd, which means change directory, and then I'm using two of these dots, and we're going to go one folder back to home, and then I will do the same thing, cd ... and now we are going to move backwards even more. And if I use the command ls, which means list, so basically list all the contents inside of this folder, and I press on enter, we can see a bunch of different folders, different directories, and compare it to C on your Windows. So you have all kinds of system folders, program files, and things like that. Okay, so now let's go back to our home EC user. We can simply do cd home, and we're going to change the directory to this folder, or we can do the full path, so home and then ec2 user, and now we are back inside of this folder, and we can check again. So we are back inside of this folder. Now we also want to create a separate folder for this project, okay, for this Unity server project, because you may have a bunch of different projects and things on this machine. So in order to create a folder, we're going to do mkdir, which means make directory, create directory, and the name of the directory, we're going to name it Unity server. And now if we do list, we can see that we have this one folder inside the home EC2 user. And now if we want to go into Unity server, we simply cd Unity server. And now we are inside, and you can also see it over here, and it means that we are inside of this folder. We can use pwd again, and now we are going to see the full path, so we are inside of this folder. So in the next episode, we are going to add a script into this folder that will basically be some kind of endpoint for testing, okay? So before we can actually have an elaborate script that will get information and send information, and before we can connect Unity to it, before we can actually create some kind of database, we just want to see that we can connect to this machine and that everything is set up correctly. So this will happen in the next episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. Please leave a like and check out the link in the description for the short Linux tutorial. And I'll see you next time.